Right, finishing up now the last part of our look at mediated communication. So this is what Darrington Lambrou say about a range of dimensions of present communications. So I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but we can see that there are a number of different aspects. So role reversibility, co-presence and distance, cotemporality, fixation, relative permanence, and spontaneity and rehearsed or scripted. So each of those, excuse me, are, as it says, here we have a range of dimensions of different things that we can look at when we're looking at communications now. So with the first one, whether you can only listen or watch. So for example, this would be the case of, if you're watching a broadcasted interview, you can only listen or watch. You cannot actually be the speaker. You can only be the audience. So if you can reverse that role, what happens there? Why does that happen? What particular media allows you to do that? And of course, things like telephones do, and they've been around a considerable length of time. So the next one, this co-presence and distance, as it says, that's most media technologies. So, we don't necessarily have to be in the same time or the same place to actually receive communication via letter, or any sort of traditionally written or printed form, so analog form we might call them. We can read the novels of Dickens, and that is a form of communication from Charles Dickens to us here and now in 2020, right back to when, Charles Dickens was writing that in the late 19th century. So, we don't, so long as we have that media, that medium of the book or a letter and so on, we can still communicate at distance. And as it says there, face-to-face speech doesn't allow that, to communicate at distance. Well, that used to be the case. But of course, the Darrington Lambrou book is 11 years old or more. So, that means that things like widespread face-to-face interaction online didn't exist back then. Yes, it was possible to do some limited video conferencing a decade ago or so, but now, well, we have Zoom and we have Teams. It's become, particularly in this year, it's become a central part of our lives. So many of these things that we're looking at, these frameworks, have changed fundamentally as to, how we can apply them because of what's happened in the world in the last few months. And I suppose that's one of the biggest problems with studying language and communication, because now that we're in a digital world, things change rapidly. So the next one down there, cotemporality, whether you're live or not, or whether, it's somebody texts and you pick it up 2 hours later, or somebody writes a letter or a note and leaves it on your door. And, so you've had the same place, you've been co-present, but not at the same time. They've left you a note. So yes, you've both been standing outside that door, but you weren't there at the same time. So, it's still, there is a shift there. And then the next one about fixation or relative permanence. So whether that particular discourse only exists at the moment of its utterance, so as it says, nearly the case for nearly all communication in the past. But, now I suppose even with things like telephone calls, they are not ephemeral. We can record telephone calls, we can record Zoom meetings. So much has ceased to be ephemeral and sort of disappearing and only existing in the moment. So much now is actually fixed. We have the ability to do that. And then the last one there, whether things have been, whether they're spontaneous or rehearsed and script. So That could be, for example, like a seminar where generally it's not going to be scripted, or somebody giving a talk where it is scripted, perhaps. Um, so that preparation and scripted element, we could perhaps look at things like whether um, whether a speech is given as scripted or unscripted. When we see politicians, are they actually saying things spontaneously? Do they have an earpiece in? Are they being prompted with what to say? So, all of these things we need to consider, and, what that means for the content, the context, the listeners, the producers, and so on. And all of these elements we should be considering if we're going to be writing about them and analysing them. So if we think about interactivity, so the degree to which two or more parties to a communication event act on each other, how far their interaction affects the unfolding direction of the communication, and how far such mutual influence is synchronized. So how much do two people interact with one another, or, two or more? What's the interaction that's going on? So we can look at these different examples of interactivity. Now this, as you can see, these are text messages. And even looking at the, before we get onto the content, if we look at the form itself, the media itself, and we can see the sort of other additional information that we really ought to be taking into consideration when we're actually going to analyse this type of message. So we have along the top there, Sprint 3G. Now, Sprint is not a UK mobile phone network. So that straight away gives us an indication that this is not British, but that's written in English. So that means that it could be anywhere that English is widely spoken. And I think Sprint is an American telephone network, mobile network. And then next to that we have 3G. That tells us about the time that this was actually created. Now, I don't mean the time which we've got along next to it, 10 a.m., but I mean, the particular period that 3G was being used and was widespread. And of course, now it's more common for us to be using 4G. And of course, we've had an awful lot in the media recently about 5G. So, that tells us about the particular type of technology that's being used. And of course, there at the far right-hand side, we can see then we have a battery symbol. So that tells us that this is on somebody's mobile phone. So all of these things, oh, and in fact, I forgot to mention the very first one there, the 3 bars, which again tells us that this is a mobile phone. So, all of these things begin to contextualise what we're looking at. And whilst we might think, well, we'll take that for granted. Of course it's a mobile, a text message. We can see that. Yes, you can see that. But if you're going to write about it in an essay, you need to establish all of these, because they do tell you, they give you more information about the context and about the medium that we're looking at. So if you're going to write about mediated communication, start to think about the medium, the form itself, and how important that is. So then we have messages, Ballerina Bob, and edit. So messages, a common thing that we would see on a mobile phone, the edit there as well, quite common button. We know that both of those can be pressed and we can sort of, do further actions on the screen. And then we have that name in the middle, Ballerina Bob. That tells us something. Maybe it's a case that this is somebody called Roberta, and it could be that because we have ballerina, so it could be that this is a woman who uses the name Bob. It could also be playing around with it and playing around with this person's name. And if we read the message we then get that confirmed. So could I get your opinion on something? Sure, what is it? I'm thinking about quitting my job. Really? Why? I hate it. I just really want to follow my childhood dream of becoming a professional ballerina. And then we have lol down the bottom there. But again, the layout here is important. We know, again, because we are used to that particular context of looking at a screen with this type of message, we know that the different colours and the layout shows that these are two people communicating with one another, and we've got questions and answers, and we've got some internet language there down at the bottom, LOL, which we know means laughing out loud, and we've got the exclamation marks, but of course we now even sometimes hear lol being used as a completely new word on its own. So that's the only bit of internet language there that we have there. The rest of it is full sentences and clear. We haven't got any truncating of words. We've not got brevity going on. And that tells us again something about the type of mobile phone. We know that text speak with very shortened forms was very much a thing of the past with early mobile phones, which would only allow text messages of certain lengths. And not just that, it was also very hard before the arrival of screens, the interactive screens. It was harder when you had to use the buttons. And if you've seen old mobile phones, you'll know what this like, or if you've used one, you'll know that you would have to repeatedly push the buttons of 1 to 0 to 9. You would have to push them repeatedly to get certain letters, because you'd have 3 or 4 letters on each button. So, now, of course, we have touch screens and we have predictive text. So it's far, far easier to write as we do full sentences. So that was, hang on, let's go back a second. That's interaction between two people, and it's private. The only reason why we are now seeing this is because it was shared wider online. But we have then things like this. So this is taken from the one on the left-hand side there is from the Daily Mail Online, which is, I believe, the largest news website in the world. Partly because it the Mail Online no longer just operates within the UK or aimed at a UK audience. If you look along the top there, you've got US and you've also got Australia. So it's a worldwide news, if we want to call it news. I'll put aside my biases there, but it's a worldwide platform for news and entertainment and features and so on, that is very much written for the English-speaking world. So we have this article, and we could go through and analyse each section about, the title there, all of the tabs, who wrote this piece, when it was published, when it was updated, the fact that we have all the social media sharing options and so on. And for those of you that are planning to take Language in the Media 2 in spring, we look closely at the British press. So, we'll be going through all of those things in considerable detail. And then, we can read the story. Now, one of the reasons the Daily Mail Online is very popular is because their comment sections are or tend to be unmoderated, which means that people do put up pretty much what they want. And respond in often quite offensive ways. This particular article, as we can see, it says, sorry, we are not currently accepting comments on this article. So, that in itself is quite unusual, and we might then consider why that's being done. So if we turn and look now at the top right there, we have an image. And at the very top we have that a yellow ribbon with a bird on it, which is the symbol for the Liberal Democratic Party. And we've then got a hand, a white hand, and it looks like it's a white man's hand, and holding an envelope which says Conservatives and a cross in there. And then we have the text next to it, cross here if you want Theresa May to sell your house to fund your care. And we could also look at how on that image the text that appears has been given different weightings. So fund your care is in a bolder font than the previous two lines, but the top line is in a still heavier typeface. So, you know, all of those different aspects of weighting of the text, that means something, or, you know, we can begin to work out what that means. What are we being directed to think? And that's an image from a tweet. And, you know, we can then go back and have a look and think about, well, how does Twitter work, and so on. So this is from Tim Farron. And, you know, if we don't know who he is, we know that he has a sort of a recognised, registered, accepted account because he's got the blue circle with the white tick in it. And Tim Farron, of course, used to be the leader of the Lib Dems. And we then have his actual tweet: Theresa May will introduce a dementia tax, forcing the sale of family homes to fund social care. Sign our petition. And then there is a hypertext link. So again, we could actually start to look at, well, we have a hypertext link in there. What does that mean? And of course, it is contextual again. It depends upon the reader understanding so many different things. It depends upon the reader knowing what to do with a hypertext link, those blue links, but also this particular tweet is dependent upon the reader knowing or remembering that 3 years ago, this notion of a dementia tax was really big news in the media. And of course, Theresa May at the time was the British Prime Minister. So, you know, there are all of these additional layers of meaning. And the reason why that's important, all of that context, is because although we may think when we look at a tweet that was sort of came out today or yesterday or last week or last month, we may think, yes, of course I know what all of that means now. But what happens when we start to look at tweets and texts and messages that are, say, from 3 years ago, in the case of this, 2017, or 5 years ago, or 20 years ago? And of course, it's not going to be a tweet if it was 20 years ago. But, you know, so many things change so rapidly that we may not remember, or we may not have been there to actually understand all of the context. So that means that if we're going to analyse this type of text and this type of medium, we need to actually look at all of those contexts. We would need to go and do some research and find out more about this if we didn't know what it referred to. And then the next tweet there, with another one with an image, and we've got the text on there: Tory triple whammy for pensioners, and then no triple lock, no fuel, winter fuel allowance, pay for care with your home, and then vote for Labour. And of course, those three, what are they called? Gloves, that's it, boxing gloves, those three boxing gloves, you know, with text on them, of course, giving us extra messages there, you know, of being punched. And of course, we've got at the top triple whammy, and, you know, that word whammy sort of implies being hit by something. And then we've got Vote Labour. We know that the Labour Party, their colour is red. So we've got that with also the symbol next to the name of the Twitter account, which I didn't mention on the Tim Farron one. There's a picture there. His avatar is a photograph of himself. But here the avatar is the red rose of the Labour Party. And again, as we mentioned, or as I mentioned on the Donald Trump Twitter feed, you know, that we have the real name, the username and the screen name, and how they can be different things. But here we have the tweet saying 10 million pensioners, that's 5 in 6, are set to lose their winter fuel allowance under Tory plans. And then we have hashtag BBC election, hashtag GE, which stands for General Election 2017. And then, of course, time and date and likes and so on. So again, we can look at all of these things. And particularly when it comes to hashtags, we can actually go and search them online. There are various websites that actually keep track of trending hashtags and what is currently trending as a hashtag, at the moment. So it is possible to follow these and to begin to work out, what's going on, what's popular and so on. Okay, so we have another, here we have images from taken from the Theresa May story. So this, if you remember, on their election a question of trust, says May, as she defends care costs cap U-turn. Sorry, we're not currently accepting comments on this article. There were originally comments, and this was actually reported on Twitter. So there is an account on there called the Daily Mail Reporter. They are not a reporter for the Daily Mail, but instead what they do is they screenshot a lot of the comments on there and then share them on Twitter. So it means that we don't necessarily have to go and read the Daily Mail or, give them the clicks for actually going onto their site. So we then have this text here, which comes from the comment section, as I say, which was closed down. Shameful attack on pensioners and the right to pass your inheritance to your family. This, as well as cuts to fuel payments, TV licence and removing triple lock. I will never vote Tory again. Corbyn has a far, far better manifesto, including abolishing university fees. And, we could look at, who that comes from, where they are, how long ago and so on. We could also, of course, begin to unpick the spacing, the punctuation, the language used, the spelling and so on. And, of course, how many times it's been liked, how many times it's been disliked. And then the next one below that, what cynical people exist in the Tory cabinet, do nothing on Brexit for a year, then call an election, knowing that negotiations have to start, and put up this nonsense as a manifesto. So, again, we can sort of have a look at what was going on politically at that time and, what's being said here, who these people are, and the fact that they're not using their real names. All of those things are really sort of, to a linguist analysing this, they all tell us something. Okay, so I'm going to go through Goffman quite briefly because, we are sort of getting towards the end here. So Goffman's participation framework. So as it says there, another one for communication, and it's about hearer versus speaker and audience participation and the overhearer. So we also have O'Keefe here, subdivision of the speaker role. So this is very much what your role is within society or within the discourse or the genre. So, that role you are taking on as the speaker. You are not always just you. You are other things as well. You can be a sibling, or a customer or the writer of an article and so on. And so we could begin to analyse this particular exchange that happened on the BBC One show a couple of years ago when Theresa May was, she and her husband were interviewed on the run up to the election. And then, it was widely derided because, she said that there's boy jobs and girl jobs. So, and we could, as I say, we could actually begin to look at the role here that she is undertaking more broadly, as she was Prime Minister at the time, but the role she's undertaking in this interview and how she's talking about it. So, lots and lots of different additional layers of meaning. So we could also look at code switching and cues that happen with code switching. And, what type of, whether we've got direct or reported speech, who the recipient is, whether there are interjections, repetitions, and so on. So there are lots and lots of different things going on. And it's not just looking at the media that's being used, but, what's being said, how it's being said, what's going on. And, you know, we could look at this, which is from Miranda. I'm not going to play it. It is because time's getting on, but it is on within the slides. Do have a look at this. If you've seen the TV series of Miranda, you'll know very much how she code switches and switches her role in some respects. You know, she steps out of being just Miranda the character on screen and looks at us, the viewer, and talks to us directly. And she is no longer the character within this closed drama, but she is now Miranda the comedian talking to us. So, you know, and that of course in itself is another role. So, you know, even that notion of role playing is, or can be, multi-layered and means different things, and, you know, is very much an element of comedy, and you know, is something that this speaking to the audience, breaking that fourth wall, has been part of comedy, certainly since the days of sort of variety and musical, you know, so going back certainly sort of 200 years, but probably more. And I don't doubt for a moment that if we were to be in Shakespeare's time, or watching a piece of Greek comedy in, you know, the period of the high period of ancient Greece, I am sure that characters turned and spoke to the audience directly then as well. So it's something, as I say, that is generally a feature of comedy. As I say, this talking to the screen. Or not talking to the screen, I'm talking to the screen, talking to the audience. Okay, right, to sum up at last. Okay, so as it says, mediated communication can be analysed in different ways using different frameworks. So what you need to do is to look at the different frameworks and work out which one is most useful to what you want to say and what you want to talk about within the particular communication that you're looking at. So communication in its canonical form can be analysed, so that's face-to-face. So Jakobson looks at that and explains how that works. So it is possible to just analyse that very simple conversation between two people, but we can also use Jakobson for different forms of mediated communication. But also for mediated communication, we can analyse it using, as we've looked at today, Lasswell, McQuail, Durrant and Lambrou, Goffman, O'Keefe and others. So whoever you look at, if you're going to do the essay that goes along with this, you know, and you are going to analyse a piece of social media, then you need to consider the interaction, the participation, the roles, the codes, the form of media, you know, all of those different layers. And we will leave it there. I will see you in the seminars.